everybody's familiar with the French paradox? French paradox is this phenomena that the French eat a lot more fat than we do, yet have a fraction the cardiovascular disease that we do, just a tiny fraction. But there's this other interesting element to this, which is that the French eat 5% of the sugar that we eat. And there are all these seemingly contradictory findings in the medical literature that doesn't fly with the lipid hypothesis. And it's just buggered the scientific community for so long. And back in 1989, a physician by the last name of Kaplan started putting some stuff together, and he noticed that we had what was called a deadly quartet, which was hyper, which in physiological terms kind of means either too much or above normal, but we had hyperinsulinism. Basically, insulin is this storage hormone that's secreted by the pancreas. People are usually familiar with it in terms of either type 1 or type 2 diabetes and the significance it has. But we noticed some elevated insulin levels. We also noticed some hypertriglyceridemia. High triglycerides. You ever hear somebody say my triglycerides are high? We have obesity, typically abdominal obesity. And we also had high blood pressure, hypertension. Kaplan called this the deadly quartet, and then another researcher coined the term to describe this and a whole plethora of other diseases, syndrome X. In this syndrome X sort of scenario, we see that the individual typically starts getting one of these things. It doesn't always happen in the same sequence too, but usually we'll see that the individual gains some weight, particularly right around the midsection. Somewhere around that time, we start seeing an uptick in their blood pressure. And then when we do some blood chemistries, we usually see some elevated triglycerides. And then when we do a little bit deeper analysis, we see that their insulin levels are starting to ratchet up. When Reven started unraveling what was going on with this syndrome X, the question became, which one of these things is the causative factor? Is it obesity that causes everything? Is it hypertension that causes everything? Or is it the hyperinsulinism as the what's a causative element and then what is an after effect or just a correlate of this main problem? Our contention and his contention is that too much dietary carbohydrate, particularly of the refined form, causes this problem with elevated insulin levels. And we'll use an analogy. You walk into a room and somebody has some perfume or cologne on and you smell it pretty intensely on first exposure, but maybe 4 or 5 minutes later, you can't really smell it. And then you exit the room and then you come back in and then you can smell it again. When you lose the ability to smell that cologne or perfume, you have what's called a downregulation of your receptors for that particular item. And insulin is a hormone that has receptors on every cell in the body. And similar to the loss of sensitivity to the cologne or perfume, if we get exposed to too much insulin, we lose the sensitivity to insulin. And it really, this is widely accepted and acknowledged, but then the solution seems to be a little bit lost on most folks. So going back to our perfume analogy, if we just minimize our exposure to the smell, then we regain the ability to smell it, to basically have our receptors pick it up. So the solution, if you decrease your insulin levels, you should return your insulin sensitivity. And if you want to do kind of an interesting little study, now pick a disease. Pick a disease that you're interested in. Diabetes. Google hyperinsulinism and diabetes. Cancer. You get a really interesting return on that. How about fertility? Anybody hear about folks having fertility issues? The very first thing that they put females who have fertility issues on is glucophage, which is an insulin-regulating hormone. Alzheimer's? Anybody worried about losing their marbles? Yeah, Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes now. It's diabetes of the brain. and you start getting accelerated oxidative damage. And basically, diabetics and people who are peri-diabetic are aging about twice the fast as everybody else. All the underpinning elements of aging are greatly, greatly accelerated in these folks. I think the question then is, what are you going to do to not be sick, to try to crest up here to well? Anybody familiar with the world-class fitness in 100 words? Meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar. That's basically the paleo diet. So this thing, the paleo diet, the meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar, is basically your get-out-of-jail-free card from virtually all of the things that are involved with metabolic derangement. This is where you're going to go for a basic escape from the standard Western diet. And this is what's going to get you to a point of wellness and maybe heading a little bit down the curve towards good fitness. For your clients, if somebody comes through the door, and particularly if they have body composition issues that they really want to resolve, they feel like they're overweight and they want to lean out, they absolutely will not make any progress whatsoever until they head at least towards this direction. You can beat their ass 10 ways from Sunday, and it won't change it. They will get fitter, but they will not get much of a body composition shift. And we see this all the time with like the doughy aerobics instructor and the folks that are like, I just did my century ride, and then I had the my goo and my pancakes, and I'm all carb loaded again. And it's like, yep, hell yeah, you are. You never depleted any of that stuff. This is your place to go for getting out of metabolic derangement and getting healthy. And then if you want to start heading into super fitness, super wellness, then you're going to have to start weighing and measuring your food, and there's just no two ways about it. I just talked to OPT, James Fitzgerald, the winner of the last CrossFit Games, on the phone, and that guy has his nutrition and lifestyle more dialed than anybody I've ever seen, and it's not surprising that the guy is turning numbers like he is on the CrossFit WODs, because he absolutely has tinkered and tweaked his performance to about the outer edges of what humans can do. But the baseline of what he's up to is the zone. So paleo has to do with food quality. Paleo equals quality. What the zone has to do with is proportions or quantity. So we've got this 40, 30, 30 ratio going on there. Is everybody familiar with CrossFitJournal 15? That actually is an amazing resource, and that is just basically understanding and avoiding metabolic derangement. When we're talking about the zone, we've got CrossFitJournal 21, and that is your go-to resource for figuring out how to implement the zone.